Hello, welcome to our show. We are Business Love with Ryan. I am Ryan. Here we focus on what it takes to make your ideas happen and the steps you can follow to make it just a little bit easier. Subscribe to our podcast to join the ongoing conversation about all things startup business related. Find even more content on our YouTube channel, Ryan's Business Class. See the link in our description of this episode. So glad to have you here. Maybe we can learn something together. Enjoy. Hey, welcome to Business Love with Ryan. I am Ryan. This is our third ever podcast, and I just want to welcome everybody. Today what we're talking about is the current business environment. It's the same thing we talked about last week, and we really just want to focus on some of the challenges that exist right now because all of this was unexpected, but somehow we must find a way to keep going. And at this podcast, what we really try to do is extract specific business models or principles or concepts and the key points and, discuss what it would take to make a similar project. It doesn't really matter what it is. We are focused on helping people create whatever appeals to them. So right now we're in a situation where we can't have offices. We can't have a lot of face-to-face selling. We can't have anything on the street, really. At least here in Ukraine, there's an ordinance coming down tomorrow that you can't even be in public without a face mask now. All public transport is shut down. All offices, most restaurants, most stores in general. Pretty much the only things that are working is carry-out food, grocery stores, and perhaps banks. Just critical institutions still have people coming, but even they are experiencing very low business because people are just staying home. The population is nervous. The population really wants to be careful. And so we ask ourselves, well, what does this mean for survival? We have to survive. We still have dreams. We still have hopes. We would like to make certain realities happen for ourselves. And perhaps in the process of solving problems for ourselves, we can solve problems for other people as well. Get ourselves back to normal at least. It's funny how much you appreciate the simple things that are now not so possible, like hanging out in the streets with your friends or sitting down at a cafe and talking with somebody. It's still possible. Most people will still sit down at a cafe, but it's more difficult to get them out of their house. People's habits have changed. People are truly concerned about their own health and, what it would mean for them. And I think it's scary a little bit. If I get coronavirus, I don't know what my reaction will be. Probably I'll feel some discomfort. I'll feel a little bit tired. Maybe I can't breathe quite so easily because the pneumonia bacteria has started to grow in my lungs. It could be anything. But at least for the purpose of our subject matter here, we need to ask ourselves, what will the future of business be? What will the future of our businesses be, or the businesses we wish to make? There's really just a few categories that most companies that exist right now will fall into. And, there are the companies that will suffer from this downturn, from this crisis, but they will eventually recover. Those would be companies that maybe don't have a lot of debt, or they've managed their debt well, because during no business time, it's your debt that really destroys your business because you still have obligations. The bank is not going to be interested in making some sort of a secondary arrangement. I suppose if the entire economy is somehow in distress, then banks would do it at a sort of government level. But I think if you are a company and you owe the bank a large amount of money, let's say you have to pay them $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month, and you don't have any business, they're still going to expect that payment. So that's what suffering is. Now, a well-run company will be able to recover from it. A well-run company that kept some cash on hand, that maybe had some insurance policies for something like this, has structured their workforce to be remote. That's actually specifically what we want to talk about today, because a lot of companies, even without a crisis, would benefit from having a more remote workforce. But so recovery might be, for any company, And for most new companies, and a certain eye on the use of remote workforces, because there's advantages to doing it. It's a more fluid population. If you have to send everyone home from your company, most of them are not geared to sit at home and do their work. So that's going to be lost money. That's going to be lost productivity. They sit at home and they watch TV and they can't get comfortable and there's no boss breathing down their neck. And so they're more likely to do 50% of the work. Whereas somebody who entered the job market with the consideration of being a remote worker, knows who they are, knows what their strengths are, believes that they can thrive in a remote environment, they're going to be more likely to do the job well, and they're going to be easier to find. And if you have enough time to look for them, it's nice to have maybe one of your staff units to be remote. Maybe not all of your call center is remote, but maybe a third of it is. There's a branch or a block, or depending on how you view them or how your applications categorize them. I think the companies of the future could really benefit from leaning more heavily on a remote workforce. So, some companies will suffer and recover. Some companies will straight up die. A lot of the younger companies, a lot of companies that are still in the growth process, if they get attacked by an economy like this, it's going to be hard to pick themselves up again. They already have debt, and the prospects of getting those early sales are much less likely than they ever have been prior. So now it's time to think about, okay, is it easier to set this business up again later? So, they could just tear it all down, stop paying rent, break the lease. There's a certain penalty for this, but it's less of a penalty than owing money. And then, you take down your fixtures, you still have your branding, you still have your intellectual property, you still have your mission and your company concept, you still have whatever assets you purchased before. Now you just don't have a centralized working location. So some companies need this. I mean, you can't have a restaurant without a centralized location. You can't have a beauty establishment without a centralized location. But software development, business consulting, financial consulting, any sort of financial management, I don't see why you have to do it in a specific office. Advertising, traditionally done in a specific office. And that's because you can brainstorm together, you have resources together, you can talk about things quickly. And it's still true, though, that as recently as, 10 years ago, even a little bit more perhaps, in some ways less, it's become very easy to work from home. Google Documents. You can share any information you're doing. And so at any time, you can just go on Viber or go on Facebook and send them a message. So it's the same truth. So why not? I think it's a little bit more comfortable for a leader, especially if you're paying them salary, to say, okay, I'm paying them this amount of money and they're going to be here doing this amount of hours, and I'm with them and I'm watching them, so they're going to be doing work. Some companies will die and then recover. Cruises, airlines. Airlines will continue to be. As companies, they're suffering right now, and a certain group of investors stand to lose a lot of money, but those airplanes can change hands. One investor sells out, licking their wounds, crawling back in the darkness to recover, whereas other investors come in excited about a fresh economy that will spring forth from this whenever this is gotten under control. So airplanes will go out of business, almost all of them. Those assets will be recovered by somebody else, and either new brand names will form, or old brand names will be revitalized under new management. This can be expected. It's not the end of the world. In some ways, it's not going to make a difference at all, because those planes are still going to be flying under somebody's flag. And so prices will probably stay the same, especially if you use a centralized forum like Expedia. It'll just be a different company name. You'll still see the same plane. It was American Airlines last week. This week it's Southwest Airlines. Let's keep on going. So the purpose of all of this is really to say that we have a Strategy Now session in our Strategy Now session, we want to talk about what it means for leadership to manage a remote workforce. Last week, we talked about what it means to be a worker and to establish yourself as a freelancer. And there's advantages to doing that. Maybe you can choose what projects you get involved with. It's a more fluid environment where you can get in and get out. Or you can be long-term. You can contract as you wish, and you can take whatever you find and work it in your own schedule as you see comfortable. You can negotiate your terms. That's really the most difficult aspect about being a freelance worker who doesn't have a specific boss all the time or is committed to a company as a freelancer, so you still keep your identity as your own company in a way. What's difficult about that is you're almost certainly going to want to negotiate the terms of your work. You're going to want to say, this is what I believe that I'm worth. And there's no problem going a little bit too high. It's much better to say a little bit too much and have them counter with a more practical offer than to say too little and have them accept it immediately. And maybe you're a little bit better friends now because you made them a good deal, but you're working for less than you deserve. But that's the hardest part. Now, as a boss, you have to be prepared for every employee you have coming in the door to be making different demands about salary and requirements. And you could say to them, no, this project has a uniform pay package for all people who work on it, and they'll have the choice to either accept it or not. But on some level, even if it's just a few statements, you are going to have to negotiate with each one of your workers. I suppose it's true in the hiring process, but it feels much more visceral and relevant when these people are still maintaining their business identity, their own business leadership identity, which is what you would expect from a remote workforce. I suppose there is some level where you could create a remote workforce of people who truly feel like they're working for you, but I just think it's time for a mutual respect relationship without unions. It's every man negotiate for himself. You don't even know who your other remote workers are, technically. They do the same job as you. Maybe you see them in the chat group, but you don't know. You don't know who they are, so you don't know if they're making more or less. As a leader, you would definitely want to make it a mandate not to discuss your pay package because different people have different experiences and different negotiating skills, and they came at different times. The list goes on. There is going to be a disparity, and that's just the sloppy way that life works. But it's beautiful in a way because everyone gets to make their own decisions. So I think we need to commit to the ideal of leading a remote workforce. Even if it wasn't a crisis right now, one unit of your customer service or one unit of your transaction recording unit division, or maybe one unit of your marketing division, a team or a small piece. Try having them working remote, because in times like this, they will keep on functioning at 100%. You don't got to scramble to reinvent that department now. It might not be practical to have 100% of your department be remote or not remote at all times, but a mix seems most practical because there, of course, like we said, there are advantages to having a centralized work location. And I'm not convinced yet that this has changed permanently. But this situation lays bare the need to balance this configuration. Balance some remote, some core location. And in order to have a remote workforce, you're going to need to sort of develop a employee interface. So your employees are going to need to interact with their job, with the company that they're responsible to, in the form of some application. Maybe it sort of functions like a profile, and you kind of have your own social media truth. You have your profile that people can see, and you have an email through the company, and there's maybe an internal company messaging board, a memo board of some sort. And you can develop a workflow just with these basic tools. And last night when me and our team here were discussing what we were going to talk about today, it became very apparent that if you're going to talk about having a remote workforce, developing your own remote workforce, it really is important to understand the workflow of the company that you have. So obviously, if you have a company, you understand that the memos go to the sales department, and the sales department acts on those memos, and then they scratch something off, and they send the same memo maybe to the next department, which would be a transaction recording for all new sales and leads that didn't work. So you would maybe have an analysis process for all leads that just came out of the marketing department. Well, traditionally, that would have been an actual piece of paper that went from basket to basket as it was processed through the different departments. And that represented a funnel, so to speak. And it was actually a visible thing that was taking place. You could actually see the departments interacting with each other, hand to hand. Now, of course, it's all online. It's easier than it's ever been. You can get weeks' worth of such work done in minutes or even maybe a few hours. And so we're much more efficient. It's just all the technology is there for a remote workforce to begin leadership roles in business, in world business. Why should our employees not be on the beach somewhere? You can hire them as freelancers, so maybe they don't demand or require or what's the word I'm looking for? Let's say demand for now. They aren't demanding certain benefits from you. They're much less likely to unionize. And so you have and they're going to be a little bit more fickle. That's how people are. They're going to be much more likely just to cut ties at any given time. So as a business leader, you would want to keep a human resources pool of potential freelancers at all times. Eventually you would realize that for this size of workforce, if I'm dealing with entirely of freelancers, I would need to have 20% in waiting or on standby or in the interview training process at any given time, because people are constantly going out the door, not as fast as they're coming in, hopefully, but sometimes it will be that way. So there's other principles that become very apparent from this situation, stemming from or in conjunction with remote workforce management. And that would be, of course, distributed manufacturing, for instance. Why are we doing all of our manufacturing in China? It's the same principle that would call you to have employees distributed in different locations and not coming to a centralized office. Why do you do that? So when the meteor strikes the Earth, you still have some workers over here and you still have some workers over there, and they're poised to continue working at 100%. However, in this situation, it's very much like we just have an office and all of our manufacturing is done in one location, and we need to distribute that. We need to distribute that as well. It needs to be not only remote workforce, but remote production as well. So then, honestly, our relationship with China has become almost offensive. Not even almost. Like, it is an affront to goodness. It's an affront to being an upstanding professional in your own, to be dealing with a country that treats you this way. I've almost thought about starting a store that says, not made in China. That's the whole point of our store. I think if you want a challenge from me, if you want a commitment to me about what the future of business should be as a result of this experience, I think everyone watching this should challenge them to go out and at least half of their purchases should be not made in China. Look at the tags. If it says made in China, don't buy it. It's time to stop doing business with them. It's time for the population to take a stand that says, you know what, this is unacceptable to me personally. Not just the way the world is, not just, everything is bigger than me and I just need to find my place. No, I think if each person said to themselves, no, I'm not going to do business with China anymore, that could become a trend. That could become something that makes a difference in the future. We should start a hashtag. Hashtag not made in China. How about that? Let's stop this insanity. We're driving a car at a brick wall. We are dealing with people with a completely different value system, and they don't respect us. And I don't know. I can't imagine myself being part of creating the next generation and then handing them this this dysfunctional relationship as the norm, as the standard of how we run a society. It's time to start downsizing them, distributing manufacturing, India, Brazil, your own country, in United States, in Canada, in UK. Why should there not be some factories? I don't understand why Russia, whose economy is faltering so bad, doesn't dive headfirst into actually competing with China. Why are they not learning, manufacturing clothing at least? This manufactures so many people. Clothing fall apart all the time. And so there's a constant need for it. It's just one example. But I think dealing with China the way we have been has to change in almost every single way. It's not just about trade war. It's not just about don't tax our goods or we'll tax your goods. It's, you know what? You need to be isolated. You need to not have anybody doing business with you. Let's see you build your own world without the leadership of the West. Let's see it happen. It's not going to happen. And this idea that we're so dependent and we have no choice and, we don't want to spend a little bit more for products, so we might as well sell our soul to China, that's got to stop. And I don't know if they did this corona thing on purpose or if it was a big accident or if it was just a freak of nature, but the timing of it is so unbelievably coincidental. It's too much to believe. It's too much to accept. I think, all right, maybe somebody ate some meat exactly 1 year before the re-election of their most staunch enemy. Yeah, let's assume that happened. And there's only a few such facilities in the world, but one of them is in Wuhan, China, and sickness has spilled out of it. So obviously. So, remote workforce, do it. In the next section, we're going to talk about business supermodels. And what I want to focus on in that is, if you are a young person, a nobody with no company around you already, no credibility, and you want to start building a company, you have a good idea. And I think that there is an opportunity to go on Upwork and organize your entire operation through a series of back and forth messages with potential workers. We'll talk about that in a second, so we'll be right back. All right, so we have the section for business supermodels. That's what we call it, and that's where we break down specific business models for people that might want to do them. And usually where I might focus on is a very specific business, like a tourism business or a activities manager or an events manager or some sort of luxury goods dealer. Today I want to talk about just the way companies are formed and some possibilities that a remote workforce contributes. So you are a young person or an older person or of any age, and you have an idea. You don't have $50,000 to get the idea started. You just have the idea, but you want to, get moving anyway. So of course, you're still going to want to educate yourself about whatever business you want to start. You want to read about your competition. You want to read about your target customer, what they want, what they like, how they do things. And then you want to just plan out everything, especially plan out how the different parts of your company are going to work together. How are the departments going to interact with each other? Who has what responsibility? Can you give all the responsibility to 5 people? What about 4 people? What if you can cut them out and add a little bit of responsibility to other people that are already in the group? Or maybe you need 10. Or maybe, 10's not enough, and so you need 11. But anyways, the point is to hire that many people and to get them all involved and working on an idea together. Traditionally, you would need to hire them. You would need to put them on a salary, and they would need to meet you at 9 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday, and stay until 5, give them an hour for lunch, whatever. And you can have meetings with them. You can adjust expectations. You can answer questions. You have them in the same location so you know that they're working. They're not, watching a movie while they're work. So you have a little bit of babysitting capability there, or, advantage, I guess. But there's disadvantages too, because you maybe could create the same workforce who is just as productive and just as diligent but stays at home. It might involve different people, because some people don't, like I said, have the skills to be remote workers, just the focus or the drive. Some people just might try to get away with as much as they can, but you would discover who they are pretty quickly. And probably you would develop a method of finding quality candidates that you could depend on. Like, for instance, looking at job fairs at universities and, really hammering home the remote workforce concept during the training process, so that they know how seriously they need to take it. And so there's no ambiguity about your seriousness or your level of dedication as a leader and as a company. So, okay, I've sold you on it. I've sold you on the concept that you want to make your business dreams happen. You should have a remote workforce. I've explained why. So for now, let's just establish that trust. You need it. You want it. There's advantages to it. The thing that I think is most important, though, is that it can allow you to form your company out of nothing very quickly and probably get, I don't see why not, quite a bit of work done up front for free by people who are hoping to make a job for themselves. You tell them, I know exactly how many hours you're going to need to work before I think we're going to have customers. That number of hours is 75. I think you're going to have to put in about 75 hours of remote freelancing work into this project before I can start showing you the money. I know exactly what you're going to have to do. I know exactly how much it's going to take, or how long it's going to take. I know how much budget it's going to cost me to do it, minus what I'm paying you or what I will be paying you. Maybe you include all initial freelancers as equity partners. And so you would make a little contract that said, I acknowledge that you own 10% of this project that we're making and all of us are making together. And so, you're always going to be operating under that brand name that's on the contract, of Verihost or Best Value Company. And so, every day when they're working for it, they know that there's a contract that says they own 10% of this project. You're going to have very dedicated, a very dedicated staff. So it's important for you as the brain trust in the middle of this to plan that out ahead of time. Look off into the future and make your financial projections and make your sales projections. And then, organize that on the paper. That's the biggest part of making a business plan, is organizing your projections. There is the way things are now. I suppose the way things have been when you're doing customer analysis and competitive analysis. It's the way things have been in the past and even up until now. And then, your business plan will acknowledge the current business environment and the potential. And then from then on, it really comes down to how are you going to structure everything. Now, in the business plan initially, you might not, include, how this information passes to this department, to this department, to this department. But you might want to have an operations manifesto. In fact, I definitely want to have this that clears up for you the way workflow passes through the company from person to person. With a remote workforce, you need to be even more clear than you've ever been before, because you're going to tell people when the lead or the information or the unit of work, whatever that means, comes to you, it's your responsibility to do these specific tasks to this unit of work. And then you will pass this unit of work on to the next person, and they will do whatever tasks are relevant at that point. Maybe it's the sales department, and now it's time for them to sell the thing. Or maybe it's the receipt for a finished sale, and so now it's time to record that thing. And so each person in each department, there will be moments when they're not busy at all. They'll have their feet on the desk. They'll be watching a movie at home. They'll be eating Cheetos. But when that unit of work comes, they need to be properly trained and poised and understand what's expected of them. And maybe you have a conference call every morning at 9 a.m. in order to make sure everyone's on the same page. And it just shows them that you're fully committed as well. As a leader, just as important as actually managing the course of events, it's demonstrating that you're managing the course of events. So with a remote workforce, I think that's even more relevant. You want to show that, good morning, I'm here, I'm the boss, I've organized this, thank you all for participating. In the instances of a new business, a business supermodel like we're talking about here, I want to reiterate the focus of what we're doing, and I want to thank everyone for working up front towards this goal. I understand all of you now are equity holders. You can say this every single morning. You are equity holders in what we're doing. Every sale we make, 10% of it is yours. Or you say there's not a person in this room who has less than 5% in this company. And so, every sale we make, every task we do, we are actually, in fact, breaking bread together. See if that doesn't bring your team together no matter where they are in the world. If you know that you own 10% of an active company, you're going to show up because it's a company and 10% is a lot. So let's talk about back from the beginning. I know I like to do this, constantly going back to the beginning and going through the process again, but let's simulate it for a second. You are a young man, looks like me. You are 19 years old, which I was at one time. You are full of good ideas, which I was then, which I am now, which I'm sure you are too, and which you will always be. You have the internet. You have a goal in mind. You would like to make a company that professionally manages racing talent and helps them make money and helps them find races and get qualified and all of this. You're a management company. And so you're going to need a publicist, you're going to need an accountant, you're going to need a scheduler, somebody who's truly on top of the schedules of everything that's happening. That scheduler would probably be an information brain trust as well. And then, and I said publicist and financial person because those are part of every team. No matter what business you have, your publicist, and that's not a marketer, that's different. But a publicist, usually your publicist and your marketer will be the same person in the beginning, but you're going to be happy to split them up pretty quickly. Your publicist is the one who reaches out to journalists and reaches out with all of the new ideas that you're bursting forth with and makes them known to the public. Very important. That would be my first hire. If you can figure out how to use one as early as possible, you'll move much faster. So then you need a financial person, of course, to record all transactions and to make financial projections for you. That, again, could be two people. Especially if you're building a remote workforce, maybe you don't want to give too much responsibility to one person because you're needing them to work, let's say, a little bit up front for you to get this thing, to go. You might be able to, call it part of the training process. You got to work for 6 weeks before, we can pay you. If people understand where they're going, then they're willing to suffer a little bit to get there. If they know the why, they can stand almost any how. So give them a good why. We're building something. We're going to change the world. I believe in it. We've already made a certain amount of traction, but we're not ready to start paying a full staff. If you'll work for me for, 120 hours, I'm possible that this is a job that will carry you for the next years, the rest of your life. Who would turn that down? But it all comes down to their trust in you. They're going to have to believe in you, and they're going to have limited information. They can do that 120 hours of work and also do another amount of work on another project. So it's not the end of the world for a freelancer to say, I'll do some on-the-cuff work. It makes sense. It's a good opportunity for them. I can imagine that there's always freelancers who are saying, I wish somebody would find me. So you be the one to go find them. Go be a fisher of men, so to speak. So you have your idea, you've planned it out on paper, and now you start approaching freelancers on Upwork.com. They tell you how much they want. It's always way more than you're ever going to pay them, so don't believe those numbers. When they tell you I want $150 an hour, what they're actually saying is, I know what I'm doing. That's what they're actually trying to say. I deserve respect. Yes, I want to have some money in my pocket. But mostly I think that number says I deserve respect. I take $150 an hour. I will not take $12 an hour. Actually, they might take $12 an hour. You have to sell them the story of the company as well, and you'll get a better price because they want to be part of it. It's all about making promises, promising yourself into owning a company. Just promise, 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 promise. Some people will not buy your promises. Delete their messages. Make the same promise to 1,000 people and let 100 of them believe you, and do that little bit of work ahead of time to get that to get that engine to fire off before we all start making money. I really think there's an opportunity there, and I'm glad we had an opportunity to discuss it. In some ways, this could be the most important section that I've laid down in this entire channel, because it describes how to make your dreams happen, even very complex dreams can happen using a remote workforce who's geared up as a freelance base, geared up to do freelance work already, able to take more than one project at once, so this one might not necessarily need to pay, a huge amount of money. And, I'll close with this final truth. I had a story that happened to me that really opened my eyes to this just a couple of days ago, or reopened my eyes, or it reminded me to focus here. And now that I've been thinking about it, I can't unthink about it. I can't stop thinking about the possibilities of managing a remote workforce. Part of it might be survival. We're in a very difficult economic situation, so obvious paths become neon, become accentuated. So let's just assume that I'm into it because it's the only way to go forward. But I'm very pleased to discuss this because it is the secret move, I think, that can help your dreams happen. Because you don't need a location anymore. What you need is people to do specific functions in a specific order, and you have your company. Maybe we're not manufacturing a product. Maybe you need to hire people to do manufacturing because it's repetitive and they have to use a machine. But services businesses are far more abundant than product and resource-based businesses in the world. The United States economy is overwhelmingly service business-based. Overwhelmingly. And you could say, well, they built all their service businesses on the back of product businesses around the world, but I don't think that's necessarily true. Maybe China. And we should undo that. But I don't want to get distracted by this emotional plea to the public to stop doing business with China. We actually probably should decide, you know what? Let's not like China. Let's unlike them. So here we are at this point in time. And an opportunity that has existed for 10 years now becomes perhaps the only way, or at least the only best way. And this entire course has been, you have a dream, here's how to make it happen. Well, this is very large principles put into a small set of words. You have a dream, get it in a plan, and start building your remote workforce on the back of promises off of Upwork. Give it a shot. If your plan is good enough and you can demonstrate a certain amount of people skills, then you should be able to make any idea you want happen on the back of a clear message. So good luck with that. Please let me know how it worked. If you try it, I would love to hear back from you. I think actually we're going to do a video series where we actually do something similar to this. So there'll be a lot of screenshots of messages. We'll see how it goes. Maybe next week, but maybe 2 weeks from now. So we'll talk about it again next week, but I think the actual delivery of it, maybe 2 weeks. We could have some mini documentary maybe. That's a really good idea. Okay, we'll get back to you. Thanks. Well, for Tech Tuesday, I just really want to talk about how robots are changing everything we do. Specifically, I was reading an article about how hospitals are using robots for sanitation. It's almost like a glorified Roomba or something like this. It's just a box that comes in, and it uses even infrared light to detect germs on the ground and on surfaces, and you can actually just program it to come in and do a full sanitation of a room. It's just really relevant right now because of the sickness environment that we have. So, new solutions to new problems create technology. But at the same time, I would say that there's a real potential that robotics are going to take a much enhanced role in society much sooner than we expected. And that is because, well, perhaps for some time to come, significant time to come, face-to-face meetings and personal exchanges are not going to be so attractive for people. And it's not going to be a desirable situation to be in a group full of a lot of people. And that includes shopping, that includes business meetings, that includes, functional group experiences where you're there for a reason. It's not like entertainment. You're not going to send a robot to the baseball game to experience it for you, so you're still going to want to do that. But, going to the store and picking stuff off the shelf could be something that a robot could do in the future. Cleaning your apartment so that it is truly properly cleaned and they have sensors to see how clean surfaces are. I'm sure that would be a very attractive robotic product that people could buy. This house has been inspected and there's no coronavirus on any surfaces, so to speak. You could have a robot that just senses germs on the surface of vegetables and fruit. Apparently, this is something we're supposed to be worried about now. Could you handle a vegetable and get sick from it? Maybe. There could be some device that scans the surface of this product and either alerts you to the risks or the dangers or the germ content, or solves that problem for you. However, I dare say that if we knew how much germs was on every single thing around us, we probably wouldn't use anything. So maybe this product wouldn't be so welcome for everyone. But if it would also do the cleaning, here's a table, is it dirty? Yes, there's dirt over here, there's germs over here. Well, can you clean it? Yes, I can clean it. So there you go. That's a nice product to have. It provides to you a very valuable service. So I think, especially in surgery, robotics is starting to become much more popular. I can imagine in auto repair or certain types of construction, robots might be much more useful. Even if they weren't cost effective a few years ago or even a few weeks ago, suddenly it becomes much more attractive to invest that money because it's much less likely that your robotic workforce or assistants or support team will become decapacitated by a biological epidemic. So we will include that article specifically about healthcare, robotics being used in healthcare. And I have a few other articles I would like to include as well. But, as far as what it means to somebody who's interested in making a business, I would say that if you can figure out types of robots that would be useful in the public and a general sense of how they would work, this belt turns this gear and this thing is moved to grab something else. You need to understand the purpose of the mechanics and, this much at least in this industry. But it's just like building a workforce. You need to know what the different parts of the robot do in order to accomplish a task. A robot is essentially a small company just of smaller robotic parts. It's just like our body is a company of organs, actually. They work together to complete a business, which is your life. Profitable or not. So we'll include links to that article below in the description. But it's just something we haven't thought a lot about, and I think it's going to take a front seat in our future as a result of what's going on. Something to note. So, because it's not just about what the robot does, it's, there's advanced ways that you could interact with that robot. Augmented reality. You could look into a screen and see what the robot sees, or it could be some sort of glasses that you wear, and you can look at what the robot is doing at all times as your companion moving around you. But even more than robotics, I think augmented reality could have a future in terms of video games and, this term gamification of basic tasks, basic interfaces. The way that you interact with your robot helpers could be something similar to the way you interact with characters in a game. So much so that it could almost become like your firsthand experience. You're looking through the eyes of the robot, like we just said, or you're interacting with an elaborate interface in order to coordinate the specific task that this robot must do. So if you want to know where I would invest my money right now, if I was, about to put $1 million into the stock market at the end of this on a long-term play, I would be willing to bet, I guess you would say, that augmented reality just got a 10x boost in terms of how fast it's going to develop as an industry, especially during this time of quarantine. I mean, virtual reality and living a different life than the one you're living is a very attractive proposition right now, and especially if you can do it from the comfort of your own home. You don't have to go to a cinema of some sort or an arcade of some sort. Now the devices and the the equipment that you need is affordable enough that it can be in your house. So I think there's a tremendous business opportunity for anyone thinking about what to do next, to develop content and interface, and if you want to really get into the nuts and bolts of it, the coding behind the virtual reality experience that our culture is probably past due to develop. So I would say that is one of the greater business lessons and opportunity identifications that become much more apparent in these specific times. As much as I would like to do the remaining sections on coronavirus, that's a lie. I am sick of coronavirus. I think it's an exaggeration. There is danger out there. But I think history will show us that the real experience of this was not the virus at all, but the disaster that took place in our economy as a result of the reaction to it. And I'm just sick of thinking about it, because there is other things that are going on in the world right now that are equally important, I would say, much more actually significant to the rest of our lives, and I would say underestimated in terms of its importance, whereas this coronavirus, I would say, is being blown very far out of proportion. And what that is the Saudi Arabia-Russia oil price conflict. Pretty much the long and short of it is that Saudi Arabia wanted to cut output in order to bring prices back up. And Russia said, no, we're not going to cut output. We're going to increase output because we need this money. And that's just the end of the story. And the Saudis said, well, if you're going to flood the market, we're going to flood the market more. It's all about who has the most potential to flood. And, this is terrible for them. This is terrible for Russian economy. It's not good for Saudi economy either. It's not good for any economy around the world that depends on oil. And it draws our attention to a truth that seems to be emerging, which is we might have turned a corner in technology, renewable technology, but specifically in storing technology. These battery packs and electric cars and the battery packs associated with them. When it comes to, for instance, Teslas, I would say the battery pack is almost as much of an achievement or more of an achievement in terms of technology and us as the advancement of mankind. These battery packs are more of an advance than the engines, which everyone are so excited about. Teslas can go 0 to 60 in like less than 2 seconds. Well, that's an accomplishment on the engine side. Now, that engine wouldn't have been possible if there wasn't such a battery pack. So the battery pack was the technology that has been waiting to be developed in order to push all these other technologies forward. And it's so funny to see cars go, gasoline go obsolete. I don't know what other way to say it. There was a value, a practical value to oil. We got our energy from it. We got our transportation from it, from that energy. And we got plastics from it and refined goods. Now, the refined goods are still going to take place. I don't want to get distracted by that. I want to focus on the fact that oil has been the staple of economy, has been that foundational product, has created the greatest fortunes in the world, for a lot of people. I mean, many, many, many of the richest people in the world have done it through oil. In fact, I would say the most rich people in the world, Rockefellers, the sultans in Saudi Arabia and many of these other countries, Kuwait, those princes there, many of these countries, they hold the biggest fortunes. They hold fortunes so big that you don't even know how much they have. But it's been estimated that the Saudi Arabia king has something more than like $1 trillion. And all of a sudden, before our eyes, in the midst of this coronavirus crisis, super coincidentally, I believe we have turned a corner to where we will never see valuable oil again. It might not be a foundational product to build a country economy on anymore. It's just not going to turn off enough money. If it costs $25 to get a barrel out of the ground, then maybe you can get, 26 for it? 27? Will you ever get 30? Well, then there's an incentive to flood the market again. So it'll just going to hover around that lower price. That's just what I think is going to happen. That's a bad thing for them. It's a bad thing for economies that depend on oil, including United States. We had a new shale oil revolution going on, world's biggest provider of energy, and all of a sudden not. But I would say that generally lower gas prices are good for everyone, except we can't enjoy it right now because of this corona coincidence. It's no time for conspiracy theories, but it's really irritating that it's happening at the same time because it's cause for celebration. You can fill up your tank of gas for not that much. Airplanes will be able to function for much cheaper. Probably oil can be used directly for energy on some level. It's just a bonanza. I mean, free energy cheap energy is the foundation of economic growth. I mean, no doubt. There's no limit to what you can build if you have unlimited energy, and that's what, $30 a barrel oil certainly feels like. So I wanted to touch on this, I would say historically critical series of events. I wanted to touch on them because it leads us into our profiles of success for this week. And that is, I wanted to focus on the Gigafactory that Tesla owns, where they make the batteries for their Tesla vehicles and other things as well. They make industrial components for batteries, and they started it several years ago, and only within the last few months have they turned the corner to where now it's officially a profitable venture. And I think the whole world was waiting to see it. The whole world was waiting to see if we would get to 2020 and the promise of the Gigafactory, which was started in 2014, was finally fulfilled to where they had actually started to become profitable on the battery level, on the energy preservation level. Could they be profitable on that level? And the moment the answer became yes, the Gigafactory is a success. There's articles on the internet with the banner that says Gigafactory successful. Why would they say that? Why would they say that now? Is it because all of a sudden they're opening a new Gigafactory in China? Or they're thinking about opening a new Gigafactory in Austin, Texas? Or that they've expanded from 1 to 4 Gigafactories already in different locations successfully? Well, it's because we reached that deadline point to where it said we've become fully realized, and now we will see the true numbers as they function. And we got to 2020 as was promised, and indeed, it's a profitable venture. What did you see immediately? World energy prices collapse. It's not because we're not going to use oil anymore. It's just because we're going to be able to store the energy much more efficiently. And we're going to be able to, therefore, use less energy. We're going to need less standby energy. The cars, not only have we mastered energy storage, but we've actually created cars in Tesla and some of these other electric cars that are coming out that are much more efficient of using that energy. So we have enhanced storage and enhanced efficiency in usage at the same time. It's a devastating turn of events for world energy providers because suddenly cars are much less dependent on oil. End of story. And, I think other equipment is going to follow suit. If we have energy storage, electric engines and electric motors become much more efficient than gas motors. Much more. It was always about being able to store that energy. And now that that has happened, it's a new world. And I think it's such a new world that the people who are in power in this world are very nervous about it. And I think it's a threat to the established order in a lot of ways. Oil backed empires. Oil protected entire populations militarily. Oil created conflicts, but it also prevented conflicts. It caused Germany to want to be on a healthy relationship with Russia, which would have happened for no other reason than energy. There's a lot of relationships like that around the world. That energy is the glue. Oil is the glue that holds these societies together. I tell you, if oil goes out of favor, I very much doubt Dubai is going to continue to be this developing place. I would be willing to bet that in 150 years, Dubai will start to return to the sand because there's no reason for it to be there. Because this population is not going to be making money the same way that they used to. If in 100 years the Saudi Arabia economy is the same that it is now, I will be shocked. It could happen much faster. I think that the king and them are going to take the money and run, and so you're not going to have the same nucleus of wealth that you had before. And obviously Russia is in deep trouble. They're spurring all of this on by their inability to stop pumping. They need every dollar they can get. They'll double, they'll triple, they'll quadruple production because, oh my goodness, this product that we depend on is going obsolete and we have way more of it than we could ever sell. It's happening right now before our eyes. And I think it's a threat to the power structure all over the world. And it's hard for me to not acknowledge that there is such an overwhelming coincidence by this historic event, this historic obsolescence of oil. It is, if you were to write the story of our civilization, our world civilization for aliens to read, the obsolescence of oil and the transition to a new energy source, that goes in the book. Coronavirus, maybe. Election of Donald Trump, not at all. Rise and fall of economies around history, not important. But us as a people switching from an oil source, and before that a wood source, wood to oil to still oil, but with enhanced storage abilities. It is a cosmic event. Not cosmic, but at least global, at least globally historic. And it's happening and we're not even paying attention to it. And that alone causes me to wonder if it's actually a coincidence or not. And so for this Profiles of Success, I would just like to give a big shout out to the people at Tesla and the people at the Gigafactory and even Elon Musk for just being good at life. And, I think what they've done is grossly underestimated. And I think it could be a beautiful future if we can just get over this coronavirus, walk our American industry, energy industry into other industries. I mean, you're going to have to repurpose that workforce to a certain level. No doubt, that's got to happen. So it probably should start happening as soon as possible. And, so you take away Corona, repurpose the energy sector employees, and suddenly you have extremely inexpensive gas. Our lives become much cheaper. Everything in our life becomes cheaper. Cheaper to produce, cheaper to go where you want. The machines that harvest your food operate cheaper. The machines that are put together for cheaper because energy is cheaper at every step of the way. It's like, I don't know. It's a beautiful reality that is beginning to emerge economically at the same time of this coronavirus. And it's so suspicious. I can't get over it. But I think it's reason to feel positive. And I think it's reason to look into the next week look for something else. Keep your eyes on the oil price. Keep your eyes on the gas price. It's a beautiful time right now, if we can just survive. So I just want to thank you for coming to our podcast. This is our third one. There's so much to talk about. I feel like I never actually properly express, everything that there is to say. I can only hope that I organized my thoughts properly to be somewhat useful. I really hope each one of these sections is useful at pinpointing the business truths of technology and the times and how other people have done it and the significance of their work. This week it's Gigafactory. Last week it was Carl Icahn, who is just a wonderful investor. And the week before that, it was, of course, Dale Carnegie, who is sort of my personal type of mentor. And I just, I hope you come back next week. Next week, we want to talk about virtual reality and home entertainment. So it's a little bit more of what we talked about this week. We'll have a new Profiles in Success. And I'm just very happy to be with you in this time. And I thank you for watching. Have a great week.